So I mentioned at the start that I wanted to talk about this survey.
Yes.
So this is a survey. The brains behind this survey is Dr. Richard Johnson, who we met at the Legsit conference we mentioned him a few weeks ago, from Queen Mary's University of London.
Yeah.
And the survey's actually been conducted by YouGov, so it's kind of got all the hygiene that you'd expect around a proper survey. And what it's trying to look at is what is the British public's attitude to British sovereignty. So it's gone and asked a lot of questions around who should make the rules. So this survey has been conducted around 4,500 UK adults, and it's asked them a lot in relation to a lot of different issues. Who should set the rules? Should it be the UK government on its own? The UK government entering into ad hoc arrangements with other countries? Or should those rules be set by an international body as a kind of binding requirement? And really interestingly, the 20 questions that were posed of people only got 10 each, so you didn't have to answer 20, but different people got different selection of the 20 questions. But the overall results of those 20 questions is that in all of them, the answer was Britain should set the rules itself. And I think it was 17, it was an absolute majority. And in 3, it was a plurality. You had to explain to me what that meant, didn't you? So that's the highest vote, even though it may be less than 50%.
Yeah, because there were 4 options.
Yes, correct.
So the top option might have scored 46%. It's not an absolute majority, but still the highest out of any of those 4 options.
Correct. Yeah. So that's really interesting. That when you pose a question in that way, that's the kind of answer you get. Because another way that you might have posed that question is, do you still support Brexit? And the problem with asking a question like that is it is very polarising, and people still have perhaps quite tribal attitudes to Brexit. But when you ask about some of the principles that I think for many of us were behind a Brexit vote, you do get quite interesting responses that do suggest that people do overwhelmingly support the idea of Britain being able to make its own rules.
Yeah, and what you're saying now, I think, will speak to people and go, yeah, we should be making our own rules. But some of these categories, which I'm sure you're going to go on to, I have to say, I was really surprised.
Yes.
Even things like AI regulation.
Yeah. Yeah.
People were saying, no, it should be Britain deciding what's in Britain's best interests.
Absolutely. I think there were a few where, it wasn't such an overwhelmingly yes response, like AI and things like data protection. And I think obviously people have in mind the idea that a lot of those are big, global cross-border things where maybe it's not entirely possible for the UK to set its own rules on its own. But some of the other categories are things like rail nationalisation, whether or not we should be able to set our own VAT rates and tax rates, trade policy, things like employment law. So a whole range of different topics. And we can put some links in the show notes to where people can look at the actual responses. But it is really surprising that the answer was, as I said, overwhelmingly positive view that it should be the UK that sets the rules. And even when you dig down into the different people responding to the survey, even people who had voted Remain, the majority, the majority of people of the answers to the questions was that it should be Britain who sets the rules.
So that's
which is very
people that voted Remain in 2016.
Yeah.
When polled in this survey.
Yeah.
The majority of those people said that in these 20 categories, it should be Britain setting its rules.
Of the majority of the questions, there was a support for Britain to set the rules themselves. Yeah. So that's surprising. When some of the kind of ways in which they tried to slice and dice the data, Not a lot of class difference, interestingly, so not a lot of difference for people's socioeconomic class. There was some difference on different party loyalties. So the highest level of support, so 20 out of 20 of the questions, there was support for Britain's sovereignty, was amongst the Conservative voters. Labour voters, 15 of the 20 questions. Really surprisingly, I thought the Liberal Democrats, 17 of the 20 questions.
So that's in 17 of the areas.
Yeah.
Liberal Democrats, majority of those said Britain should have set its own rules.
Yeah. And the lowest number was the Greens, where it was 11 of the categories. So I'm hoping I'm getting all these figures right because I'm doing all this by memory. So as I say, we will put a link, but you know, definitely the message is right. So it's interesting that when you ask a question that isn't, do you still support Brexit? You try to get a little bit under the skin of people and ask them their actual views on ideas of, you know, whether we should be able to take back control, if you want to put it that way. People are in support of UK being able to set its own rules.
Yeah, in the introduction to the report, he talked about regret, didn't he? Regret.
Yes, yeah. I don't know how you pronounce it. Regret, yeah. So whether people have a regret about having voted Brexit, and certainly in the mainstream media, that is the message that comes through all the time. So there's a number, isn't there? 29% of people now. It's only 29% of people now still think that we should have exited the EU.
Yeah, and I love that word regret because originally it was Britain exit, became Brexit, and then Brexit regret became regret. Yeah. So it's like you've taken what do you call that? Is it a portmanteau?
Yes, yeah.
But you've taken a portmanteau and then added another word in there. It could just, a continuous chain would be cool. Yeah. And you think 29% of, in the polls, 29% of people would say they would still vote to leave?
I think so. I think that's the number.
I can't believe
Pretty
that.
sure
I don't believe that.
Okay, well.
So I think there are a lot of people that have changed their mind. Yeah. I think there are a lot of people that said, I voted to leave, now I would vote to remain if the vote were again tomorrow. Two things that counter the narrative which a lot of people would like to peddle. Yeah. Like, oh, maybe we should look at going back into the EU, which I think would just be the craziest disaster as a country. But one is that a lot of people have changed their mind that voted to remain, but would now stay out. Yeah. Right? I think you'd be surprised. A lot of people I know. Yeah. And the second thing is that's if there were the vote again tomorrow, if we rehashed the vote, or if it was like a hypothetical, you sort of could change something from the past with a magic wand. I think there are a lot of people now that say, I don't want to leave the EU, but we voted to leave. Let's leave. Let's put the question behind us. Yeah. I think it's true as well for Scottish independence. It's something that Craig Houston, the SDP leader in Scotland, often says. He says, regardless of what you think about Scottish independence, let's just agree to sort of shelve that for 10 years. Yeah. And let's just focus on the things that we can do in Scotland. Yeah. Let's focus on the things we can control. Yeah. And so if we're not actually doing it properly, and I know people on the other side of this will say, what do you mean not doing it properly? You've had every opportunity. Well, the government never once wanted to do this, right? We had a class of people that were, whether they were ideologically attached to the EU or whether they were just had no vision. We haven't really seen what Britain as an independent nation state can really look like. Mm. And so if we're not going to do that properly, what's the point? We might as well just put down our tools and sort of give up entirely. Yeah. And so I think what the media really misses is that what we need as a country is to move on and say, this is what's happened. Now we're going to unify and bring everybody together. Yeah. And a large part, I have to say, and this is on the Leave side, I think a large part of what has gone wrong in terms of just people on the Leave side has not been to say, okay, but there's 48% of people that might be uneasy about this. We need to bring them along with us. And what's really interesting about this report is you can see you can build a coalition of consensus there. Yeah. Where people say, actually, this thing, I want Britain to decide on it.
Yes.
That's what excites me.
Absolutely, yeah. So perhaps two things to add to that. One is that I think quite often when people are giving their explanation of why people, to the extent that there is some regret out there, why does that exist? And a lot of people would say it's because people think things have changed too much. They want to go back to the way things were. You know, they don't really like the world that we've ended up in. But I think there is an alternative explanation to this, and this is one that is made in the commentary on the survey, which is that actually people think we haven't taken up those opportunities that Brexit gave us, and actually things haven't changed enough. And if they thought we'd gone through all that heartache to actually carry on much the same as we were, then perhaps they wouldn't have done it. But there's still a hankering and an aspiration that we can take back democratic control over some of those areas that people really want to see that where that democratic control is. I think the other story that I wanted to kind of just tag on to this, if that's okay. I don't know if people saw Catherine McBride had an article in the Times today about the Euro reset, the great Euro reset. And she is making the point that we now have from the EU their whole list of all the things they want to have control over as part of the reset discussions. And as I understand it, government could make decisions in a lot of these areas without there being any parliamentary scrutiny, any legislative change. They could just agree to this agreement from the EU. And that would be expecting us to do things like give up more of our ability to regulate on employment, on food standards, on agriculture, on fisheries, even more than we already have. And it would require us to make a payment to Europe for the benefit of this. That would all be, judgments on all those areas would be made by European courts. And it would effectively undermine the international agreements that we have already entered into. So to the extent that we are saying that we have an ability to import food from New Zealand, that food from New Zealand would have to be subject to EU regulations. So it undermines those treaties that we have agreed.
And when you talk about the reset, what are you referring to?
So you know that Keir Starmer has already started to have discussions with the EU about, because he wants to reset our relationship. And in some ways, I think, if that just meant, come on, we've got to look forward, not back, I would be in favour of that. Let's stop rehashing what's gone on in the past. Let's look forward and really start to work in a collegiate way going forwards. But I don't think Starmer means that, and I don't think the Labour Party and the government particularly mean that. I think, have in mind that they will effectively take us back into something that looks very much like the customs union, without us having any say over any of those rule-making institutions. So, effectively, the gains that we have had from Brexit, I think, could be further undermined as part of this reset project. And interestingly, what this survey indicates is that would mean the government going against what ordinary people want. So I think now is the time for ordinary people to make sure that government hears the message that absolutely is not what people want the government to be doing. It's not that people regret Brexit and want to go back to the old ways. It was that they really want to rise to the challenge of, making the world anew in a post-Brexit world.
So are you positive after reading about this, the results of this survey?
I'm really positive about the fact that is the way that people think. And, a survey's a survey, isn't it? And once it's always helpful to get a few repeats of this kind of message from surveys, because sometimes you get a rogue one.
Well, the sample was like 4,000 people.
4,500, yeah. So it wasn't a tiny sample at all.
It wasn't tiny, but I'm sort of already like, the country have spoken.
Exactly, yeah. Well, to some extent, I am as well. So I'm really positive about the fact that that's the way people think. I am less positive about whether government is listening, and I'm actually very nervous about the fact that government could effectively undo a lot of the changes that have happened that do actually give us opportunities. I think the Great Reset could be the Great Rewind.
Yeah. And I would say to anybody listening, if you want to hear about what some of those opportunities are, we did an episode on Lexit.
We did, yeah.
Which is the left-wing vision for leaving the European Union.
Yeah.
Go and have a look at that.
Absolutely. Do that, yeah, yeah. And, you know, to the extent that people can further these debates and conversations in their everyday lives, it will be good to, you know, keep talking about these things and make sure that, because I think a lot of the time people think nobody else thinks like I do. And I think, you know, because we're in the SDP and we talk to people who often share some of our views, perhaps we don't feel as isolated as some people do. But I think a lot of people do feel very isolated and they think, oh, I can't say that because nobody else thinks like that. But I think what this survey does is to give us a bit more confidence that actually most people are quite sensible.
Yeah. Most people are quite sensible.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So trust each other a bit more than perhaps we've become used to.